Unwind the clock back to the early 20th century, an era of escalating tensions and complex alliances. Europe was a tangled web of connections, rivalries, and promises that stretched across borders like a delicate piece of lace. A fascinating yet dangerous dance where one misstep could send the entire continent spiraling into chaos. At the heart of this intricate ballet were the major powers, each with its own set of alliances and grudges. The United Kingdom, France, and Russia formed the Triple Entente, a powerful coalition created to counterbalance the might of the Central Powers, which included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. However, the seed of conflict was planted not within these titans, but in the volatile region of the Balkans, where Serbia and Austria-Hungary locked horns. Serbia, a small, fiercely independent nation, chafed under the overbearing presence of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The tension between these two nations simmered, slowly building to a boiling point. The spark that ignited the powder keg was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. The heir to the empire was killed in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist, a tragic event that sent shockwaves across Europe. Suddenly, the complex web of alliances and rivalries was set in motion, as nations were pulled into the vortex of conflict on the coattails of their allies and foes. It's important to remember, however, that the assassination was merely the trigger. The underlying causes of the war ran much deeper, rooted in national pride, economic competition, and imperial ambition. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand merely lit the fuse on a bomb that had been years in the making, and so the die was cast, setting the stage for a conflict unlike any the world had seen before, a war that would redefine the course of history, leaving an indelible mark on the generations to come. The year was 1914, and the world was about to descend into chaos. The fuse for the Great War was lit when a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. This single act of violence sparked a chain reaction of events that led to the outbreak of World War I. The first to declare war was Austria-Hungary, who, feeling threatened and seeking retribution, declared war on Serbia. But the intricate web of alliances that crisscrossed Europe meant that this was not to be a small, localized conflict, far from it. As the dominoes began to topple, one declaration of war followed another. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, was quick to join the fray. Russia, bound by treaty to Serbia, mobilized in response. France, linked with Russia, was then drawn in. And when Germany violated Belgium's neutrality to stage an attack on France, Britain, a guarantor of Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. These early days of the war were a flurry of movement and strategy, as each country mobilized its troops and prepared for battle. One of the first major conflicts was the Battle of the Frontiers, where French and German forces clashed in Belgium and eastern France. Meanwhile, in the east, Russian forces moved into East Prussia, engaging German forces at the Battle of Tannenberg. But it wasn't long before the rapid maneuvers of armies gave way to the grinding stalemate of trench warfare. The Western Front became a brutal landscape of mud and barbed wire, where progress was measured in yards, not miles, and the cost in human lives was staggering. As battle lines were drawn, the world braced itself for an unprecedented conflagration. This was no ordinary war. It was a war that would reshape the world, redefine warfare, and leave a lasting impact on every corner of the globe. The stage was set, the players were in place, and the world was about to witness a conflict like no other. The Great War, as it was known then, had begun in earnest. The world was witnessing a scale of conflict hitherto unimaginable, and the landscape of warfare was rapidly changing. From the trenches of the Western Front to the vast expanses of the Eastern Front, battles raged on. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 halted the German advance into France, marking the beginning of trench warfare. The brutality of the Gallipoli campaign in 1915 highlighted the strategic importance of the Dardanelles Strait, while the Battle of Verdun in 1916 became one of the longest and most devastating battles in human history. Amidst the chaos, new warfare technologies emerged. Machine guns, tanks, poison gas, these were the tools of destruction that defined the Great War. The British introduced the tank at the Battle of the Somme in 1916, forever changing the face of ground warfare. Meanwhile, the German use of poison gas at the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915 marked a dark chapter in the history of warfare, leading to the loss of countless innocent lives. The war was not limited to Europe. The entry of the United States in April 1917 marked a significant turning point. Following the Zimmermann telegram incident and unrestricted submarine warfare by Germany, the United States threw its considerable resources and manpower into the conflict. This intervention was a game-changer, providing a much-needed boost to the beleaguered Allies. However, despite the bloodshed and new entries, the war remained locked in a deadly stalemate. The Central Powers and the Allies were entrenched, both literally and figuratively, in their positions. The front lines shifted back and forth, but no side could claim a decisive victory. The war had morphed into a stalemate, with neither side able to claim decisive victory. By 1918, the world was weary of war, yearning for peace. The year was one of decisive actions and pivotal moments, a year where the tide of war was turned. The Central Powers, strained by the weight of a long and grueling war, began to falter. In November, the German people, exhausted and desperate, revolted, leading to the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II. This sparked a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the end of the conflict. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fell silent. The armistice was signed in a railway carriage in Compiègne, France, marking a cessation of hostilities. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The Great War, as it was then known, was over, but peace did not come easily. The following year, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. It was a document of retribution more than reconciliation, placing the blame squarely on Germany and Austria-Hungary. It imposed hefty reparations and territorial losses, sowing the seeds of resentment that would eventually lead to another global conflict. The aftermath of the war was monumental. Empires crumbled, new nations were born, maps were redrawn, societies were irrevocably changed. The war had claimed an estimated 9 million combatants and 7 million civilian lives. The Spanish flu pandemic, exacerbated by the war, added another devastating blow, claiming millions more. Yet, amidst the rubble and ruin, there were glimmers of hope and resilience. Technological advancements born out of necessity during the war led to innovations in medicine, transportation, and communication. The war had also set the stage for important social changes, including the women's suffrage movement and labor reforms. Indeed, the war had ended, but its impact was far from over. The world had been forever changed, and the lessons learned would shape the course of the 20th century. The memories of the Great War served as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of global conflict. The Great War had ended, but its echoes would resonate throughout the 20th century. The First World War, a cataclysmic event that reshaped the world. It was a conflict that erupted in the heart of Europe, quickly spreading to all corners of the globe. It was a battle fought on land, sea, and air, involving millions of soldiers and civilians alike. The prelude to the war saw a complex web of alliances and rivalries that set the stage for global conflict. When the war finally broke out, it was marked by unprecedented violence and destruction. Trench warfare became the gruesome reality, with fronts that seemed to move at a glacial pace, while the casualties mounted at an alarming rate. As the war progressed, it became increasingly clear that this was not a typical conflict. New technologies and strategies were introduced, changing the face of warfare forever. Tanks, airplanes, and chemical weapons made their shocking debut on the battlefield, and the world watched in horror as the death toll continued to rise. The war ended, but not without a heavy price. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June of 1919, brought an end to the fighting but set the stage for further conflict. The economic and political repercussions of the war were felt worldwide, and the map of Europe was redrawn with new borders and nations. The First World War left an indelible mark on the 20th century. It influenced subsequent global events, from the rise of totalitarian regimes to the Second World War and the Cold War. It brought about significant social and cultural changes, including the suffrage movement and the lost generation of artists and writers. The legacy of the war continues to reverberate through history. It serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, of the fragility of peace, and of the necessity of diplomacy and cooperation in the face of global challenges. A century later, the First World War continues to serve as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of global conflict.